I ain't no suit wearing businessman like you. You know, I'm just a gangster, I suppose, and I want my corners.
Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Five Corners Podcast. I am Jet Bonifay, and on the other line, he still believes there's an alternate reality where Michael Jordan got drafted by the Knicks. It's Ace Berluzza. What's up, brother?
What up? What up? What up? What an awesome night tonight for the Last Dance. That was I actually enjoyed that more than last week.
It was a good Last Dance.
Yes. Yep.
We also have tonight a special guest. Maersk is back once again. We're going to have him probably more often. So it's good to have two guys that are non-Knicks fans. Go ahead, Maersk. What's up, man?
What's up? This is a thoroughly good episode, episode 3 and 4 for The Last Dance. I can't wait to get into it with you guys. I already told you guys, though, I already seen up to episode 8.
It's funny because it's two Knicks guys. You know, I was a Bulls fan because, you know, I grew up watching Michael Jordan. My dad loved the Knicks, but I never got into them. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be interesting to kind of hear you guys, you know, talk about Michael Jordan because he was such a behemoth against the Knicks. So that's going to be an interesting little dynamic. I want to know what the hell's going on. So I guess if we break down the 4 episodes, because we didn't really go through like the first 2 and then the other 2. The first one is like basically a superhero origin story, right? It's like Michael Jordan and how he became Michael Jordan. You had to go to like a Fortress of Solitude. Then it was like Jerry Krause, he's the villain of this movie, right? Then it's like, all right, we have our cast of characters, one of which is like a weird sidekick. It's Dennis Rodman. And then it's like the, right? It's that you have to overcome this villain, which is the Detroit Pistons. So I think they're laying it out really well. It's weird to me though. How do you guys like the cutting back and forth? How do you feel about that?
I love it. I mean, it kind of like I like that aspect to it because I personally like the flash forwards and, you know, the serialized dramas that we currently enjoy. So I think to add that element to it certainly adds like an awesome layer to like the key characters that each episode focuses on. So you see the backstory, and you know you just see the evolution of Jordan's career as it ties into The Last Dance. So for me, that's great.
What about you, Mayor?
Yeah. I usually, when I see stuff like this on like Netflix, like where it's a certain timeline, like in The Witcher, it jumps from one timeline to the next. I usually hate it. I get mental dizziness from just trying to keep track of where the story is. Right. But I think it helps that The Last Dance, they actually tell you where you're going before they take you there. The whole timeline thing is awesome too because it actually feels like you're going in a time warp, right? To a time that you actually knew, and then further back to a time that, you know, just to get the backstory of Mike, backstory of Pip, backstory this week of Phil, and the backstory of Dennis. I mean, it was there. It's great how they're connecting the dots from how '98 was going and to where they were, and I feel like it's right now for me everything's perfect.
And I think what's happening is you're watching. I mean, obviously the documentary's name is The Last Dance, so it's chronicling like the last year. But to your point, Maersk, it's kind of connecting those dots. It's like that breadcrumb trail of what's going to happen up to the point where they get their last championship against Utah. And I think they're trying to build up that tension, and then, you know, it's kind of like a good story. You're invested now in what Dennis Rodman was doing. We were kind of talking before we went live about like how interesting that backstory was. But the Phil Jackson backstory is interesting as hell too, right? I had no clue he was like a Pentecostal minister's kid. I had no clue about that. I thought he was like a Buddhist when he was born.
I did, however, because I read 11 Rings soon after he got hired by the Knicks.
My bad.
In my naive excitement. But it was kind of cool to see it in front of me visually.
So I didn't realize too how long he played for the Knicks. Right. And again,
Yeah.
I'm not a
Yeah,
huge, you know.
it was most of his NBA stint, and then the other stint was with the Nets. So he's always been like a metropolitan area guy. It's sad that none of that worked out for us in modern times, but whatever.
But it's good to see the pedigree because it's kind of he was the right, and it was funny because you saw tonight how much Michael Jordan loved Collins as a coach, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's a great coach, but he said it straight up. He's like, Doug Collins gave me the ball, and he let me go to work.
Yep.
You know, it's kind of like, you know, I mean, Ace, you know, it's that ball stopping forward mentality, right? It's like, hey, give the ball to Carmelo and let him work, which is great for stats. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think you can get over the hump with that type of strategy going into the playoffs.
Yeah. And for me, the biggest takeaway from that segment was how long it really took for them to, one, buy in, and two, ultimately master it. I mean, you heard BJ Armstrong say it took like a year and a half, and MJ pretty much called it out as being BS. He didn't like it at all.
Right.
So when you want to talk about Phil Jackson's stint, I think he tried in earnest to incorporate it. It's an ancient offense, but it really takes time, and there was no continuity on the Knicks, and it was doomed from the start. It wasn't going to happen if the lead guy wasn't going to buy in and commit for the amount of time that you really needed to execute it the way it's supposed to be executed.
Yeah,
I think it's
go ahead, Maris.
It's fascinating though, like how old the concept of the triangle is. Like, and I think in episode 4 we got a great backstory to actually how the triangle is diagrammed.
Right.
And when you think about it, it's just a really simple way to get everybody moving and cutting towards the basket. And then when all else fails, of course, Mike bails you out. But
right.
I think it's a testament to how the game was played back then compared to the way it is now, where everybody's just kind of, everyone's a stretch this and everyone's a stretch that.
Yep.
But I think, especially for the three of us as players, kind of coming up in that era in Jersey City, we gravitated towards that style of basketball because for you as a Bulls fan, it was beautiful to watch.
Sure.
And then when the Knicks went up against that with their rough and tumble stuff, it was the ultimate like clashing of two styles, and we always wanted to see which one was going to come out on top of that day. And I think like just the history of how the triangle got started is fascinating from Tex Winter. It's just like it's just so bizarre how old that concept is, but it's still, if there were no 3-pointers in the game today, it would still be, I think it would still be the way to go.
And I was literally going to say, you know, Ace made mention of it, that it's ancient, right? Think about now, right? Clogging the lane with two guys. You're basically on every play.
It doesn't happen.
Right?
Yeah.
You just can't. I mean, and again, I think that has to do with exactly what you said, Maris, about like the evolution beyond the 3-point line, right? Where the game is now being played where everybody could score. I mean, let's get back to Rodman. The guy didn't score. Mm-hmm. Imagine now having a 4 that cannot score.
Right.
You can't play them. I mean, that's the reason why Clint Capella got traded from the Rockets.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, Ace, what do you think about that? I mean, you had Porzingis for a little bit. He was, you know, quintessential stretch 4 type of guy. But imagine now in this day and age to have a guy like Rodman. Great, sure, he grabbed 20 rebounds a game, but he gave you 0 points, and he was. I mean, he literally, you know, he told us in the video, like, hey, yeah, I'm standing here when Michael shoots the shot. I mean, he's literally planted in the lane waiting for shots to go up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think about who's the best rebounder currently. I mean, it's the center, right? It's I mean, who is it?
Drummond, probably.
I think he's leading the league.
He's got to be leading the league.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, and I'm trying to think of how he contributes from a scoring standpoint.
Yeah, he's a weird asset too. If you think about it now, not many people want that guy who can't shoot beyond the elbow. Right? It's difficult in today's day and age.
And when you speak of a stretch four, how about like a preview into the genesis of the prototype stretch four and Sam Perkins
Yeah.
at the end of episode 4? I'm like, Sam Perkins was in essence
Wow.
the stretch big before I was in vogue, right? I mean, I remember watching it. I'm like,
Right.
he's the center for the Sonics,
Right.
and he's shooting threes.
That's right. That
I
was
totally
revolutionary.
forgot that he was on the Lakers too. And sure enough, there's that shot of him shooting a three at the end of that like singular win that they had to start the NBA Finals.
I mean, but let's get back to that one too. It's like you saw a couple of those. Scottie Pippen, also like the genesis of, you know, the point forward, so to speak, or the I guess you would call them 3 and D. I don't know what Pippen's stats are from a 3-point standpoint, but he's definitely that type of perimeter and D guy that you would have. I mean, you could slot him and Michael Jordan in today's game, and they work perfectly fine, right? Because they play defense and they can score anywhere on the floor. But I think, you know, to our point about the triangle, you needed to have somewhere where you collapse the defense on Michael Jordan and be able to kick it to somebody else. You know, it's funny to hear, you know, in that Lakers final, that final game, Phil Jackson having to remind Michael Jordan that John Paxson is open. You know, it's just
right. Yeah.
It's such a.
Can you imagine though if Mike was in the league today and he's on the same team as Steph Curry? Forget it. That team is 82-0.
I mean, you know, but think about what he said there, right? He said, "Oh, I realized I can drive and kick."
Yep.
I mean, this is the greatest player on the planet, and it took him until that game, you know, a championship clinching game, to realize, hey, I can drive, draw defense, and kick out to an open shooter.
I think up until that time, like, Pax was on the team, I think maybe since '86, but then like he wasn't in a position with Doug Collins, who just gave him the ball, like you said earlier, to trust his teammates, I think. And then I think that's where Phil, I think, is a key component into him realizing, hey, Scotty's gotten better, Horace has gotten better, and you have all these other guys that want to contribute with you to winning. And then if you play to their strengths, you know, your greatness is going to magnify through them.
Yeah, and I think he made the great point where he said, you know, he was trying to convince Michael. He's like, look, they're going to start, if you're the only one that's going to shoot, they're going to build defenses around you. Mm-hmm. And again, I think that's another epiphany that Michael Jordan had. He's like, oh, that's right. I think he's been such a, you know, great player for so long that the ball's always been in his hands. He's like, oh, you're right. This is why we can't get over the hump with the Pistons, because they literally, I mean, they called it, right? It's called the Jordan rules. It's so funny. You know, I watched those, you know, those clips, and I'm just like, they couldn't get a clip of Anthony Mason and Charles Oakley beating the hell out of Michael Jordan. I'm sure there has to be a couple, like, in the archive, right?
Yeah, I think they'll get into that in future episodes, the whole Knicks rivalry, which I'm looking forward to. Well, not really, but when you talk about getting over the hump versus the Pistons, how about that training montage?
I love it, man.
Right? How about, like, you know, Jordan setting the tone, how he realized he had to build out his body and kind of score without, you know, going into the air, score in different ways, so they don't like play into the rules of like knocking him down when he gets into the air. All right, let me introduce you to my ground game and my new muscular frame. That to me was a huge takeaway for me, and it's making me miss the gym a lot more now, I'll be honest.
But it's funny that you mentioned that, though. Again, you know how different the '90s era basketball was. Their trainer was like, Michael never hit the gym. I mean, he basically just played ball all day, and you know, went back home. I mean, it's so different now, where eating, weightlifting, yoga, right, cryotherapy, all the stuff that we know now.
A lot of physical technology,
right. You're talking about the greatest player on earth, and he was like, maybe I should start lifting weights over the summer so that the Pistons can't beat me up. It's like weird to think about, right?
Yeah. I mean, back then, it wasn't a league. It was a physical league, but if you look at everybody that was doing the damage, it was guys that looked like they would have just beat you up in the YMCA anyway.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
look at Lane Beer for crying out loud, right?
Oh Jesus! It's funny too, that segment on the Jordan rules, because you really saw, and I've seen all these highlights before from because I've seen every Michael Jordan home video maybe 100 times, and in Michael Jordan's playground they have all those clips in the montage. But I was telling Ace earlier, like, you see these clips now in The Last Dance from a different angle,
Right.
and you see when what's his name, Brendan Malone, I think,
Yep.
the coach for the Pistons.
Yep.
He's telling you what the Jordan rules were.
Sure.
Force him baseline.
Mm-hmm.
When he's up top, you're gonna play him to his left.
Right.
And then what happens when he gets in the paint? Put him on his ass.
Yeah, put him on his ass. I mean,
and then when you see the highlights now, you'll see that's exactly what they did. And then once he gets past Microwave Johnson, once he gets past Dumars or Isaiah Thomas, it's Buddha Edwards, it's John Sally,
right.
and it's Lane Beer, ready to just put him on his butt, and
right.
they don't give a damn. You even see some highlights of just random Piston players that were put in just to put Michael Jordan on his butt.
But I think and Ace, you can speak to this. Riley did the same thing, right? I mean, that was the prevailing strategy in 90s basketball. Again, everything is so compact and everything is so lane and post driven that you had the opportunity to do that. You can't do that now, right? There's 5 guys beyond the 3-point line. There's nobody coming to help you, right? You get by the defense. That's what I'm saying. To your point, Marisk, about if you transplanted Michael Jordan to this day and age, he'd be averaging 50 points a game because there's nobody that's going to come near you to help out, like a Spider Sally or a Lane Beer, because they're babysitting a Porzingis. So it goes back to that evolution. I mean, Ace, you can talk a little bit about what the Knicks were doing against Jordan, but it was highly effective in those days, right? Because they didn't have those shooters.
Yeah, they didn't have any consistent perimeter shooting, but what they did have, and what they didn't have to face with the Pistons, was a dominant low post scorer.
Right.
And I think what ultimately doomed the Knicks was that Ewing needed a guy that he could throw it out to and consistently hit a shot and create, and he never had that. But they made up for it in terms of being competitive by their hard-nosed defense and a similar style of play as the Pistons. But yeah, it's tough to reflect back on. But yeah. At the bottom line, he just needed that second star, and he just never had it.
Right. I mean, you had, I know we're diverting. Obviously, there's 2 New York Knicks fans here, so we're going to do that. But you had Starks there for a little bit, right? That was supposed to be that extra, bullet in the chamber, so to speak. But he to Ace's point, he never quite got over that hump to be that consistent second-tier scorer for Patrick Ewing to be able to rely on, right?
Mm-hmm. I think also the key word that both of you are using are consistent, because Starks had his moments, but he wasn't a Pippen. He wasn't even Horace. He wasn't, like, in today's game, like a Klay Thompson. Consistent.
Sure.
He didn't get those guys till it was too late. Like he finally got Allen Houston, who came into his own when Ewing got hurt in '98. And then you had Sprewell in '99. 2 awesome wing guys that they'd been with Ewing earlier. That
right
would have been a different story.
Yeah, that opens up another wound for me, because in 1997,
I love how Knicks, this Michael Jordan conversation just opening up wounds for Ace. But go ahead.
It did. 1997 for me is a wound that I don't think anyone talks about enough, because I think from 1 to 12 they were positioned to compete with the Bulls, and they never got that chance because of the suspensions.
Right.
Yeah.
Because although Patrick Ewing was on the downside of his career, he still hadn't destroyed his wrist.
That was his last great year. Yeah,
that's right.
He still didn't shred his Achilles to pieces, and Houston was serviceable enough where he could knock down a shot. And LJ, although he was a shell of himself, he transformed his game enough where he was a pretty good supporting player. And you still had Oak, John Starks was thrust into a six-man role where he flourished in and won the Six-Man of the Year award.
Mm-hmm.
You had Buck Williams off the bench.
Buck Williams.
Wow. Yeah, as a veteran
That's
leadership.
Right.
I loved him on the Knicks that year. And yeah, you know, I think about that all the time, and it just angers me every time I think about it. Like, what if we played the Bulls in '97?
So what was the what year was that when Charles Smith got completely stuffed like 3 or 4 times? What year was
93.
that?
93.
93.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, 93. I mean, I don't want to. A lot of what we're talking about right now gets covered. Is going to get covered from episode.
Okay.
So let me give you.
We'll pivot.
Yeah.
Let me give you. Let me tell you real quick though.
Preview.
If you guys liked 1 through 4, 5 through 8 is the bread and butter of this series. You are gonna love it, and AC, you and I are gonna cry as Knicks fans. But it's gonna. This whole conversation that we're having is gonna have more relevance then.
But you know what though? I think what they're doing is they're establishing, like, you know, I made mention of it before. It was like an origin story, right? This is you know, Luke Skywalker flying to Dagobah, right? And he's just like, oh, here's Yoda, which is Phil Jackson in this analogy, right? And he's like, yeah, you know, you're a Jedi now, dude. You know, so I think this is just the beginning of that. Like, they're establishing who they needed to have as pieces, and I think, you know, obviously Maersk knows, but I think because of that, they come out of this Pistons hill that they've had to climb, and they're like, oh, we are the juggernaut now. You gotta run through us now. And I think that's what makes it even more compelling, because you run up against, you know, the teams like the Knicks, teams like the Pacers, and those were the best rivalries because it was the East, and it was that hard-nosed type of basketball up against this kind of, you know, like we mentioned about the triangle. They were so fluid with it at that point that it was great to see, like, you know, a rock in a hard place, them running up against the Knicks, then the Pacers. So I think, you know, they're setting us up for that, but now establishing kind of, here's how this thing all started.
Yep.
So I mean,
if you're going with the Star Wars references, we're about to go for the trench run next week, and then the week after is going to be Empire, which is the best Star Wars movie ever.
Sure,
I don't care what anybody says.
No. You get no arguments from here, brother. You're not going to get any arguments here.
Yeah, I mean, we're in for you guys. We're in for. I'm gonna obviously watch it again because it's a great treat to see this now, and especially in the circumstances that we're in.
Sure,
I think it's the timing of them releasing this early is perfect.
What do you feel, Ace, about the timing? It's a good place to segue into the timing of this. You know, it's pretty savvy of ESPN, obviously, you know, with sports drying up, that they needed to have somebody or something to watch, right? And I think obviously Michael Jordan is as compelling as any, right?
Yeah, and when you think about what we lost out on March Madness, we lost out on the playoff race in the NBA, we lost out on opening day in baseball, we lost out on so much, and obviously everyone was talking about The Last Dance. Everyone was excited for the preview. So with things the way they are now, why wait until after the NBA Finals is over when there's not going to be any NBA Finals?
Yeah.
So this is something we needed, like at a time like this. And we're all starved for like sports and pop culture, and this is everything we thirst for all in one.
Yeah, and I
think
think
5 weeks.
Yeah, I think to your point, it's everybody's in a basketball mind frame, having, you know, in our minds, timeline wise, we're like, oh, you know, Final Four, right? Start of NBA playoffs. And I think on top of it, it's pretty savvy of Michael Jordan too. It's basically a Gen Z commercial for Michael Jordan. Because we all know we're late 30s, early 40s at this point, right?
We know already,
right?
Yeah.
We've seen this. This is just for us, like that dopamine hit of watching Michael. Well, maybe not for you guys, but you know, dopamine hit of Michael Jordan. You know, shot against Craig Elo. You can almost rattle it off, right? Shot against, you know, Byron Russell. We all know this. This is already in our minds. They're just kind of mining our nostalgia. But for the kids that are like in their 20s who've only seen it through like grainy YouTube videos to see, my wife was watching it and she's like, he's so graceful the way he moves. People forget, right, how good basketball players were in the 90s because we get like this bad reputation of, oh, it's that grinding, slow paced, 80 to 82 point, games that you run into. So I think it's marketing for Michael Jordan too. Not that people have forgotten him, but certainly beyond just basketball shoes, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And, and you think about how competitive he is. And we've all heard the stories about, the rumblings and the debates about who the GOAT is. Come on. MJ knows when he needs to release this documentary.
And he still hasn't said it too. And he's the best for a reason. Like you've heard LeBron say like offhand or in certain things that, this is when I became the greatest player ever when he blocked Iguodala's shot.
Right.
I've heard that and I was just like, what are you talking about? I like LeBron is great and LeBron is top 5 all time, I think.
Yeah.
But it's still like there's no comparison yet. I don't even think LeBron is better than Kobe was. And then it's funny. I think you're right, Jet. Like now, this is a great like advertisement for Michael Jordan for this generation. And I was gonna say something else too, but it just like left my head because the rage in my head of LeBron is Jordan just kind of took over.
But that's recency bias, right? That's recency. That's again, this is what the kids have been watching. Kids in their early, their late teens, early 20s. This is all they know is LeBron, Curry, to some extent, the older guys, we put that in air quotes, the Kobe's they might have seen when they were really little. But in general, they're like, well, I've only seen like clips of Michael. You didn't see him exert his will on people in a 6-game playoff series, right?
Yeah. It's funny too, because the interviews that you're seeing. I mean, here's another thing I love about The Last Dance is that you're seeing the guys talk relatively unedited. Like you hear cursing and everything.
I love
like
that part too. By the way,
I love that. Yeah, because up until now, when's the last time you heard Michael Jordan curse
or even speak? Let's be honest.
Yeah. Well, so that's what I remember now. So the last time we saw Mike speak in a public forum, obviously was Kobe's funeral,
right?
And I think in that speech, not only was it heartfelt, but I think he won over a lot of Gen Z with that, with the speech. And I think transitioning from that, purely from now I'm going into the business standpoint, from that to this, I think now this is 2020 is going to be the year, hopefully, where this generation realizes Mike's number one.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. I think like you said, it becomes one of those scenarios where they don't know any better, right? You can't really blame them because you didn't see them in, gargantuan matchups against, again, like I mentioned, the Pacers, the Blazers. You didn't see them. We saw it live. So that excitement that bubbles up when you're watching that type of playoff game, you associate with the player. When you're watching it through YouTube clips, like when we watch Bob Cousy, right, on grainy YouTube, it's probably not the same as some dude who's in his 70s going, yeah, when I watch Bob Cousy, that guy could ball,
It's funny hearing like that person of that age talking like that.
Well, I mean, what do you think, Ace? I mean, is that a fair assessment that people are just like, well, LeBron is around, I play him on NBA 2K20, so it's easier for me to associate with him?
Well, I'll say this much. You heard Michael Jordan say, I want to administer pain, right?
Yeah, I love that part.
Yeah.
That was great. That was a great line.
And when you think of style of play, and you're right, you guys are talking about like Gen Zers looking at grainy footage. They haven't watched entire games where you could like, and they haven't felt the emotional roller coaster, whether you were a fan or not of a team that he demolished, like our Knicks. you had to have watched it. It's like one of those things where, all right, he's going to get his 40, but the way he did it, Like we were doing all that we could. We were throwing all these defenders. Like you're like Craig. Like you knew what was coming, and you just knew that the Knicks could do nothing about it and like it.
Even when they
And
won.
it just kept on happening.
Yeah.
And it was like,
and God, Ace.
No player has made me feel like emotional hurt by just watching them play. I mean, LeBron, he affects and impacts the game in so many ways, but the way he scores, if I was like a fan of like, let's just say the Celtics, a team that, or any team that the Heat, the Cavs were rivaled against, I just don't feel you feel the impact emotionally when he played. You know, you had to go through it to really explain and describe how it felt, and that to me is why I feel he's the greatest.
I feel the pain now because hearing you talk is just like making me like all these emotions are just coming back from when we used to watch these games live in the 90s, and I'm just like, even when the Knicks won, you still were just like, he's gonna do it. He's gonna do it. He's gonna do something, and then you're just like, and then when they won, it was like a relief that somebody missed a shot to put the Bulls over, and you're just like,
yeah, we escaped.
Yeah,
we got in the getaway car and we sped off.
And I think part of that is, like you said, it's that imposition of will. Like you don't get that in short YouTube clips. You get that from getting your heart broken by him, right? If you're a non-fan, if you're playing against him, or if you're a fan, you're like, oh my God, he just won us the game in the last second. You don't associate that. It's two different things when you're watching it on a YouTube clip versus watching it live and in person and feeling the anguish or the elation when you're watching these things happen. So I think that's associated with it. The funny thing that I think about all the time is that a lot of kids don't know Jordan besides shoes. Right? Mm-hmm. They don't know these games. And so it's kind of surreal to think about. Like, there are kids out there that only know it because they're hot releases of some retros from back in the day. To think about that and to correlate it with the guy, it's kind of weird because, again, you're watching, and this speaks to us getting older too, but, you know, we saw it live, and these kids know him through releases of his sneaker because people are waiting online or it's on hypebeast.com or whatever. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you speak of elation, and Jet Maris, you heard Mike say something to the effect of beating the Piston to some degree, being better than actually have won the championship that year. And when I was watching that, the clips of them finally getting over the Pistons, I was like, man, it would have been fun to have felt that as a Knicks fan to get over the Bulls hump, beating Jordan. Would we have? Debatable, but I would have liked to have had a chance, i.e. 1997, but that's neither here nor there, right? So,
but again,
story
I think
for another day.
But it's funny though. I can't think of another, maybe Philadelphia, more ravenous fan base. Like, imagine if that happened and the Knicks got over that hump, right? Where would the Knicks be right now? I mean, it goes back to that. It's funny, you know, Mariska's been dropping the What If series for us, which is awesome, by the way.
Thanks.
But it goes back to that. Like, if that game broke the other way, if Charles Smith made that layup, right?
Yeah.
Where would we be?
That would probably set up another Jordan highlight at the end of the game.
Well,
that's the way we're thinking as Knicks fans.
Right. Well,
if he makes the layup,
right.
If he makes the layup, there was still 3 or 4 seconds left. That probably would have set up another Jordan highlight. The way Knicks fans have become accustomed to him.
Yeah.
And you can't that's that whole psyche of Mike's on the floor. You're still probably gonna lose.
Yeah.
And I'm just like,
right. And I'm wearing a Giants hat today, guys, because I'm repping our team that we just did well. But those were the games that every time we stepped on against Tom Brady, you felt that way, right? Anytime you stand up against the GOAT, in the back of your mind, you're like, there's gonna be some way we're gonna lose this. You know, snatching defeat in the jaws of victory, right? You always felt that in the back of your mind, like, what is he going to pull off that's going to, you know, extinguish my elation right here?
Yeah.
Luckily, he didn't.
He did, no doubt, 2 times. I mean, both,
2 times.
but both times I was stressed out, though. To the point exactly of what you're thinking about. You're like, okay, Tom Brady has the ball again with whatever 45 seconds left. It's again same thing. Michael Jordan is going to get the ball back with 2 seconds. The likelihood is that he's going to do something Michael Jordan-esque, and you're going to lose.
Yep.
And there's obviously, as starving Knicks fans, you guys have been at the brunt of that, unfortunately, for such a long time. It stings.
Yeah, it does, and I remember all those moments vividly. I don't know why, but like the most painful moments are probably the ones that are etched so firmly in my head that it just like makes me nod my.
Would it be funny if I just rolled like the animation of like the crying Jordan meme as Ace started talking about like Knicks failures?
Yes,
that would be
that'd
ironically hilarious, right?
That'd be hilarious. Yeah.
So a weird thing popped up that I didn't realize. It said it was like a weird trivia thing during one of the commercials. It's like Phil Jackson had the most winning seasons coaching. I was like, did he have a winning season when he coached with the Knicks?
Well, he never coached the Knicks.
He didn't coach.
Oh, you're right.
Executive,
right.
Yeah.
Executive. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's right. Yeah, so I was like, wait a minute. I don't know if he was actually. But again, it's like this guy is the superstar whisperer. You figured he would have done something on the Knicks, but it takes a long time to get a team to gel.
Yeah, I think he meant well, but he just couldn't do it from the executive offices. He could exert his influence as much as he can. It just couldn't translate when he wasn't really doing the president job full time, and everyone knew that. That was common knowledge. But hey, at least he tried.
But go ahead, Maris.
I think it's a different player base now too, man. Like even watching this documentary shows you how what a player's mentality was back then. Through its biggest superstar, Mike worked hard, played hard, wasn't worried about a contract at this point. He was just getting paid what he was getting paid, and with management being the way that they were, but Reinsdorf said himself that we're not negotiating contracts after you signed it,
which is crazy, right?
Which is nuts. Today, the players would hold out until they got their 90 million and stuff like that. It's a different type of player now, where I don't think even Phil would have been able to reach Melo, obviously Porzingis, and all these guys that are just mostly about their money, and then winning comes second.
Right.
And it's a shame to see, because you're really cheating I feel you're still cheating. You're cheating the game of your best potential, because you're not getting paid an extra 25 million that the average person would just kill to have.
Right. But it's one of those things that, like you said, I think Scottie Pippen tried to exert it a little bit, but like you said, the era was so different that he even said it on tonight's episode. He's like, look, I wasn't going to win. I mean, imagine somebody saying that now. Let's say the second most important, like Klay Thompson, let's say, for example, got signed to a crappy rookie or second year deal. Imagine him just saying, oh, well, I'll just play through this contract. That would be, like you said, that's unheard of now in this day and age of player empowerment, right?
Yep.
They would just hold out and they'd just be like, that's fine. I'll just sit here and I'll just not play. I think Scottie tried to do that and he realized they're not going to budge. But that's such a seismic shift in mentality between players and owners that in the span of less than 30 years, they basically now dictate how contracts are going to get doled out. I mean, if LeBron tomorrow said, I want to make $60 million, I mean, not that he would do that because of salary cap restrictions, but they certainly would try to move heaven and earth to do it, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Like you said, you can't now do what they were trying to do. I mean, it makes me laugh though how insanely ridiculous that contract was, right? Ace? I mean, they make fun of it. It's like 122. He was the 122nd highest paid player in the NBA. He's one of the top 50 players ever to play the game, right?
Right.
I mean, who the hell was that guy's agent? Poor Scottie Pippen.
Yeah. Well, and I think from the memes that have come out since episode 2, you see that he made it up later in the career, but at that time he was producing his best and
Right.
getting paid absolute peanuts compared to everybody else.
So do we have like a is there an analog for right now? Is there a player that we think right now in general is playing at their highest peak and is getting the most underpaid? Can you think of anybody at this point?
To some degree, Steph Curry, they kind of locked him up early enough where they could have sustained their run. But it was still a sizable contract, just not as big as what he could have commanded after he emerged from the ankle injuries when they locked him up early on. But I can't think of anybody else because they have rookie deals now. You can't sign someone for 7 years at
Right.
$18 million. I mean, they come into the league. It's 3 years and an option, I believe.
Right.
But as a fan, I wouldn't mind hitting big in the draft and signing someone for 7 years for X amount of money. But the caveat is you better hit. Otherwise, that's wasted money and you're locked in long term.
So what?
It's kind of like a catch-22.
So what side do you guys fall on? If you were the owner of the team, right, and the second best player in the league is averaging like 24 points a game, 9 assists, 6-7 rebounds, comes back to you on the third year of his 7-year, $18 million. Just to hear it makes me laugh. But what side do you fall on as the owner?
Here's your raise. I'm not gonna it's
okay. So that
if
Maersk is on the altruistic owner camp. What about you, Ace?
Yeah.
Like you signed a deal, you play. You're contractually obligated to play through your contract. Too bad.
Do you play that wah wah like as he's walking out the door or what?
Yep.
So I think that, and they've said this, I think again in like since episode 2 has come out, the analysis has been there. The 122nd paid player in 2020 is Andre Roberson, and it's $10.7 million, and he hasn't seen the floor this year.
Right. But this is, and again, obviously, it's gone astronomically high, these salaries, right? With all the cable contracts, everything that comes along with it, it's gone super high. But to think about, like, even on his own team, even on Scottie Pippen, if you're going to analogize it to his own team, he was the 5th highest paid player on his own team. He was making less than Will Perdue.
Oh my God. So let's say, again, what was the number? It was 2-point-something million that he was getting paid per year for that long contract, right?
$7 million and 7 years, 18 mil. So yeah, something like $2 mil a year with like a bonus kicker, maybe.
So even if we go, let's say the 280th paid player, and I'm picking him because he's famous with the kids these days, is Alex Caruso from the Lakers. And he's
Alex Caruso gets buckets
million.
though, man. He gets buckets.
Man, come on.
I know.
I mean,
he dunks pretty hard.
He dunks hard. LeBron loves him, man. I don't know what to tell you.
Stop it. Even Alonzo Trier from the Knicks. And we go back to the Knicks.
Trier. Wow.
250 first paid players, $3.5 million.
So who would we analogize Scottie Pippen to?
Oh, I got it.
Day and age.
Sabonis. Domantas Sabonis, who is an All-Star this year, is at $3.5 million.
But that's a rookie contract, though, right?
Is it still?
Yeah, it's what is he? Ace? Okay. It's second year, right?
No. I'm not sure. No, he's got a couple of years in his belt because he started with Oklahoma City and then he got traded to Indiana. So he might be heading into restricted free agency. So.
All right, so play the hypothetical game with me. Who would that be now? Who would we correlate to Scottie Pippen from a skill level perspective with an Alonzo Trier and give him an Alonzo Trier contract?
That's nobody.
Who would that be? Who's a Scottie Pippen player now?
LeBron.
But think about that, right? Think about what we're saying. We're saying right now the correlation to Scottie Pippen is LeBron. That's funny.
I think the closest person on this list, barring injury, is DeMarcus Cousins because he's making $3.5 million.
Okay. And
But
again, he has not seen the floor, right?
correct.
At all.
Yeah, and he hasn't seen the. There's nobody, and which is it drives our point home even more.
Right. So, and it goes. Let's kind of circle it back around to what they're trying to do and position, not so much the Bulls owner, but certainly Jerry Krause as like the number one, the architect, because you got to give him props for bringing all of these people in, right? I mean, you got to give him that. He did that. That was all him. He architected it. I'm cool with that. You got to give him his props. But now he obviously was cool with the fact that Scottie Pippen signed that contract, which again, from a general manager standpoint, it helps you, right? It frees up cap space. It allows you to get other players and pay them, Ron Harper, keep BJ Armstrong on, whatever the case may be. But it also drives a wedge in the team. And, you know, Pippen was gone for 35 games that year. And Michael Jordan it probably hurt their relationship, obviously, because even now he's kind of pissed about it. He's like, well, he had to do what he had to do, but I was trying to win. You know, I was on the floor every night. So,
right.
And, you know, the seeds of contempt were sowed from Jerry Krause's obsession with Tony Kukoc.
Yeah. So,
you know, I mean, you've all heard the stories about how Tony was targeted by MJ and Scottie during the Olympics.
During the Olympics.
You know, so it just kind of snowballed, you know, and I think we all kind of sniffed it out as it was happening, that contemptuous relationship between MJ and Scottie and Jerry Krause. And yes, he did well in putting that team together, but he is fully responsible for the undoing of that team too.
So
prematurely.
How old was Michael Jordan when he retired? 34?
Which time?
Well, I guess you know the subject of his documentary, the 34, right?
Yeah.
35. Because he was 35 when he hit the shot against Utah.
Okay, but I mean, the guy, it wasn't like physically it seemed like he was, you know, going downhill, right? He probably had another 3 or 4 years in him before it actually physically caught up with him.
Yeah.
I don't know what his love was with Tony Kukoc. And even Tony Kukoc was like, what's happening here? You know, I'm inbounding the ball and Scottie Pippen and then Michael Jordan are defending me.
Listen, again, I have the advantage, but this is going to be our topic for next week.
Okay, so I want to see Tony Kukoc speak. Is he going to speak, Marisk?
Stop it right there. Let's pivot.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's pivot.
You don't want to get spoiled. All right. Fine.
Guys, but the way Ace has been this entire night, it's as if he wrote the series, because everything that he has said it's you're a prophet right now.
Well, that means he could write a documentary. Maybe the next documentary should be about the Knicks.
Oh God.
I'm here for it.
Go ahead, Ace.
Yeah, I think as far as tonight goes, I don't think we've touched enough on Dennis Rodman and how much more cerebral he truly was, more than we ever gave him credit for.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, I think they definitely.
I mean, I didn't know. I didn't know.
I think that was one of those things where, you know, this is a Michael Jordan produced, you know, documentary. So most of episode 1 was Michael Jordan. There was Michael Jordan. I mean, it's going to be Michael Jordan centric, which stinks. But yeah, I wanted to delve more deeply into what made that guy tick, because, I mean, how tall is he? 6'7", let's say 6'8",
6'7".
Okay,
6'7", 6'8", yeah.
I mean, consistently in the upper teens on rebounds per game. To think about that as a guy at 6'6", 6'7", whatever his height was, to be able to get positioning that well, that he's leading the league in rebounds consistently for close to a decade is insane.
Yeah. Yeah, and MJ said it. He's arguably, and I think he went right out and said it. He's one of the smartest players he ever played with. So, I mean, if the GOAT is saying that, so there's some credibility behind that statement.
And yeah, go ahead, Marisk.
And Phil described it best. I forget who said it though, but they're in the locker room watching film, and it looks like he's not paying attention. But when Phil called him out, he regurgitated everything that was going on. So they said he was different. He doesn't have to look like he's paying attention. He's one of those
Savants.
Those savants. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was looking for the word.
Yeah.
He was a savant in that aspect.
Well, even that story that Michael Jordan told about when he had his little hiatus in Vegas, right? And they brought him back.
That was so fun.
Right?
Yeah.
And they're just like, he's telling the guys, just jog so we don't have to get, but they were like, dude, it took us 4 tries to beat Dennis. So, to the point about
God.
he's going to play hard, but he's also working super. I mean, I guess that comes along with being 6'8" and being the leading rebounder for almost a decade, right? That has to come along with it. Because again, rebounds are sneakily one of the most important stats in the game of basketball. It ends a possession for the other team. If you don't get the rebound, they just keep shooting the basket. So, I think it speaks to him mentally. I think the other part that I liked was because Phil is so uniquely well positioned to coach somebody like, number one, Michael Jordan, right? Because of the way kind of Phil thinks about the team, and I'm sure the Zen and the Native American, teamwork thing had a lot to do with that. But at the same time, he's such a freewheeling spirit. What his guy was like, he's basically a hippie. The fact that he had Dennis Rodman probably was the reason why that worked, right? I mean,
yeah, totally did, because they had common interests. That's how you build rapport. It's one of the big factors in building rapport. When Dennis Rodman referenced having a necklace from a tribe in Oklahoma, and how Phil said that he's the Heyoka of his tribe,
right,
and that
right.
kind of like feeds into Phil's core philosophy that he instilled into his team of being a tribe and being together as one unit. So that's how they connected.
And I think they just let him be who he was, because they did know that he was studying. They did know that he was physically prepared. They were just like, okay, Dennis, you're different, man. It is what it is. But it's funny, though, again, paralleling now, who would be allowed that free pass to Vegas? Like, just be like, hey, in the middle of the season, just be out for 9 days. That's cool. Come back when you're ready, and we'll keep playing, right?
Yeah. Nobody. It's funny. Again, like just the parallels of how we treat, or they treat the NBA stars today to how they had to treat them back then to get the most out of them is crazy. And also, like, I know the three of us forgot that Carmen Electra existed before this.
Oh my God. And she still looks fabulous. I mean,
one of my favorite segments of that night.
That's right.
I was hoping she would describe a different kind of event when Michael Jordan knocked on the door.
All right.
I'm just saying.
I'm sorry I brought this up.
Come on. Come on.
But it's funny, though, that they didn't have handlers. It was like literally Michael Jordan went up to his hotel room and was like, hey, Dennis, it's time to go back to work. I find that utterly hilarious, too. Like, Michael Jordan's the one guy that's going to grab you from the hotel room. Just be like, hey, it's time to come play now.
That's got to be one of the best stories that has come out of this series too, and especially with Carmen Electra also just saying, "I hid myself under the covers in the couch. I didn't want Michael Jordan to see me like this." I was like, "Oh my God, can we move on?"
But even now, right? You wouldn't be able to get away with this. Social media, cell phones, TMZ, a 8 day bender, which is what it sounded like, right? Would
have been documented.
Every second of it would have been on Instagram, right? I mean, Joel Embiid got drunk one night and we made a capital case out of it. Imagine a player doing a 9 day bender in Vegas. What that would be like in the talking head circuits of, today's social media and media, right?
Mm-hmm.
It would be unheard of. I mean, especially somebody as high profile at that point and unmistakably Dennis Rodman, right? You couldn't even, you could probably mix up a couple of, second-rate players in the NBA with other people. You can't not tell me you don't recognize Dennis Rodman walking into an establishment, right?
Yeah, the
especially with his style and his hair, he's definitely hard to miss.
So that was the other thing that I wanted to talk about is like, is he the precursor for what we're seeing now in terms of like pregame fashion? I mean, he certainly was out there, right? I mean,
yeah, I think so. Yeah,
you know, a Westbrook outfit. Could we make an analog? Maybe I'll put it up on the screen here and kind of.
I don't think though anything that Westbrook has worn still outdoes Dennis Rodman.
Okay, all right, yeah, he's probably left field.
I think you're right though. Like and he's the early one to have gotten away with any of that. I don't remember him getting any fines for wearing a wedding dress or just dressing the way he did. You know, that came later after the Iverson era.
But that's funny though to think about it that way. That they were okay with Dennis Rodman being Dennis Rodman, but somehow when Iverson wore what Iverson wore, it became an issue for David Stern and company.
Yeah, I think it was more of a cultural thing too, because Rodman was the only one doing that, and I think had the rest of the league followed suit with dressing it like Dennis Rodman, then it would have came down. But like, it was something that Rodman still is he's proven to be still one of a kind in that aspect.
And is it just me, or did they make it seem like Madonna was responsible for unlocking like Dennis Rodman for who he is now?
It was one little sentence, and then
right. I mean, I was like,
that was it.
I was like, all right, I guess Madonna did it. All right, cool. I didn't know about that, but again, it's, you know, to Ace's point earlier about it's super interesting to possibly learn more about Dennis Rodman. That's one of those things where I'm just like, yeah, I'm in for like a how did Dennis get this way type deal, you know? And I'm hoping that they you know what, the other thing that I liked seeing Bushler, and I liked seeing BJ Armstrong. I mean, I like seeing Bill Wennington just in general, but I've seen him around, you know, but to see those other guys that you don't normally see, that's always a treat for a guy who hasn't seen, you know, these guys in normal society in a long time. I thought that was pretty hilarious.
And how about UConn's own Scott Burrell?
Oh, Scott
being
Burrell
put on blast and being worried about seeing what mom and dad would see and hear. Right?
Listen. If Michael Jordan is saying anything about me, even if it's bad, I'll take it. I'll take it. I'll put it on video. I'm good with that.
Totally.
Oh, speaking of cameos, I mean, going back. Isn't it hilarious? They had the Barack Obama, and then they had like Arkansas governor, right? Like Bill Clinton. Yeah. I was like, what in the? That was a hilarious cameo from these guys.
It's funny that you don't even realize that Rodman was Rodman, right? They're related to Clinton.
Oh, it was Pippen because he was playing.
It was Pippen, Pippen. That. Pippen's from Central Arkansas.
That's right.
You didn't connect the dots until that episode.
Yeah, you're like, oh yeah, right. Clinton's from Arkansas, and it's funny. He's just like, yeah, I was just going up to him and saying hello to this guy, Scott Pippen. I was like, well, okay. Even the Barack Obama one was pretty interesting because it you know, being where we're at now in this kind of quarantine era, it's funny to think about how kind of sports interweaves in your life on a day-to-day basis. You start like associating people with the teams that you're like, oh yeah, that's right. Barack Obama was a Chicago, you know, big Chicago basketball fan, right? And you forget about that. And again, same thing with Scottie Pippen on Arkansas. So I think they're delving into all the right things at all the right times. So I'm interested to see what the next couple of episodes unfold. So any final thoughts, guys, as we kind of wrap up episodes 1 through 4? I think, again, it for me, it definitely set up a good foundation for, you know, what the next few episodes are going to be like. And it sounds like, based on what Maersk is telling us, that it's going to definitely rear its head towards rivalries in the East. So I'm looking forward to all of that, because I think that's when you really see how the East deals with Jordan's greatness. And that's some of the most heated basketball and some of the best basketball I've ever seen played. So I'm super excited for the next few episodes.
I'll say this, you know, since we're going with the theme of what ifs that Maris has been, you know, masterfully playing out. I'll leave you guys with a fun fact. Scott Pippen.
Pippen.
The Knicks had traded the pick that ultimately became Scottie Pippen for Gerald Henderson.
Wow.
That's all I got. Yep.
I hate you.
The Knicks
you gotta change that jersey. You gotta change that jersey, Maris. Put
the
a
Knicks
jersey
traded
on.
the pick to Seattle for Gerald Henderson. That Seattle ultimately traded to Chicago for Olden Polynice.
Olden Polynice. There you go.
That is one of the greatest NBA names.
It is one of the great NBA names.
And here I am talking about second star. How Patrick Ewing needed a second star. Guess what?
Scott Pippen could have been the one.
A pick that became Scottie Pippen. That's all I got.
Oh my God! What about the evolution of Scott Pippen from 6'1" to 6'7" in college?
Listen, I'm hoping for my kid to have that type of evolution. By the way,
I'm gonna leave you guys with this. Obviously, I cheated again, but I think next week we're gonna have a very emotional conversation.
Ooh,
put it that way.
Emotional. I like that.
And I want you to be the first 5 minutes of episode 5 is gonna hit you. I think, and just be ready for that.
Oh, I think I know where this is going. All right. Yeah, me.
It's gonna hit.
It's gonna hit, and some of it is actually. So I've been checking Instagram just now, and then some of they're previewing some of it now, and I'm gonna tell you right now. I had texted. First of all, when I watched it, I've texted Ace, shout out to Jeff Almagnana and Dale Rondena, that I had to text them, because they're 3 of my best friends. If I haven't said it lately, I love you guys because I watched this damn episode.
Wow. Well, I love you guys too. Just FYI.
Yeah.
I'll wait for it. I don't want to watch any previews till they air it.
You better not watch any social media.
Don't watch social media, bro. All right. On that note, it sounds like I gotta steel myself for next week's episode. Oh boy, it's gonna be an emotional roller coaster. It sounds like cool.
I can't wait, guys.
Can't wait. Bart Scott voice. Can't wait.
Can't wait.
All right, so like we said, we're gonna do a what if series. I think that'll be super fun. We still got to do a draft, redraft pod. We're gonna talk about what the Giants did rounds 1 through 7. So we'll do that pod too. So a lot of good stuff coming up. Maersk, you want to plug anything?
Go ahead and check out the new What If series on my Instagram, and
cool.
I will be having a new series also on Maerski Draws. Just stay tuned for that.
Ooh. All right, Ace, you got anything?
No, I already dropped my final nugget.
All right, copy that. All right, we appreciate everybody joining us. We'll see you next time. Peace.
Peace, guys.
Peace, guys.